from the floor. You can speak from your seat if you have a good loud voice, or we do have a microphone in the middle of the room. Sir?
Yes, I come from Brazil, which is where part of the world where bananas and soccer and coffee comes from. So nobody paid any attention to the fact that in 1997 Brazil went open access on a national basis by creating what was known as Scientific Electronic Library Online, Cielo. I think we didn't have the subscription problem because nobody subscribed Brazilian journals. So we weren't losing any money, and that's very different from your problem. But I think the really interesting thing is that Cielo started in 1997, which was Optic Express started, picking up the 25 Brazilian journals in ISI, and 2 years later, they were getting about 20,000 downloads per paper a year. Now they're getting 4 million. There's 300 paid journals from Brazil and 500 from the rest of Latin America, Africa, South Africa, Spain, and Portugal in the Cielo system. There's 800 journals. They're all open access from the gate. The full journal, they're all journals treated as conventional journals with peer review. The full journal is archived in the Cielo archive, and we get about 250 million downloads a year last year. So it makes a huge difference to journals which were not subscribed because they weren't interesting enough to be subscribed. The impact factor, it's still way below American impact factors, but we're beginning to get close to 2 for a few journals now, and quite a few above 1, which was unheard of before Cielo, totally unheard of. So, open access, if you don't have the finance, we pay our way being subsidized by the federal government, state governments, and the societies, but we're beginning to charge now. We've been charging about $1,000 per paper, flat rate, doesn't matter what color or no color, it doesn't make any difference electronically. And people pay it. I mean, they just have grants, and we haven't had too many. Obviously, we have discount requests. We don't give discounts, and guys come up and pay for it. So very few people, actually 2 or 3%, finally decide they don't want to publish because we're charging. It works. I mean, we still don't pay ourselves. We think next year the best journals will be paying about 80% of their costs and being from just by charging fees. So it works. It can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a comment and a question that may be a little off the wall, but I'm from the University of Pittsburgh, at the Health Sciences Library System, and one thing with regard to the hybrid system where an author can pay extra to a subscribed journal for open access, in our case at least, when our authors ask us about this, we strongly recommend that they not do this because our view is that the institution is already paying a substantial amount for a journal and the author should not agree to pay more for that particular journal. If they want to publish in an open access journal, they should do that, but not pay twice. But anyway, and this is for the MIT librarian, and maybe this is an off-the-wall question, but I'm wondering, since you have a mandate and since you support open access as an institutional mandate and you support authors, has MIT or any of the other institutions in your coalition investigated whether they can include these kind of costs when they're negotiating their indirect cost rates, their F&A facilities, F&A costs with the federal government for indirect costs on grants?
No, we haven't to the latter, and I just want to. This works, okay. I just want to say it's not a mandate because there's an opt-out provision in this, and so faculty do not have to comply if they don't wish. Although we've only had about 3% that opt out. So no, we haven't gone down the route that you suggested, although it's an interesting one and not off the wall. We like off the wall things. But I think we're still in the stage of trying to, with this new faculty group that's going to help guide us, the working group, I think we're going to start thinking about the next phases, and that is something we certainly would want to consider. And to your first point that you made, I just want to reiterate that we don't actually support with our COPE fund hybrid journals either, for the reason that you stated.
At the beginning, I invited questions, but also if you have comments, if your organization has developed or is developing an open access journal or an open access business model, what's going well, what's not going well, are there any best practices you could share with us, or any other questions?
Question for Nolan. I believe in your top tips for open access, you mentioned that managing peer review is very difficult. Is that how? I mean, what makes it difficult?
It's not that it's so difficult, it's the scaling issue, because you have a huge volume and it's in a short period of time. So our work with our editors there is to really fast track. When you're talking about a total time to submission to publication of 60 to 65 days and 10 days are for payment, you're really talking about, 50 to 55 days for the entire publishing process. So it's more the speed and managing that.
I think this is more of a comment. I'm Jennifer Larity at the Indiana University Libraries, where we support open access publications, journals, and a repository, though we don't have a mandate of any sort. I was listening to OSA, your comments about peer review, and I'm glad that question just came up, because I often get a lot of faculty who are very confused and equate open access to all sorts of things like, that means no peer review happens. And I just want to make that comment that, of course, the editorial processes are at the control of who's ever at the helm of the publication. And that, to me, open access has more to do with free availability to readers and that is fundamentally it. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that. And Daniel, I wrote down very distinctly that you were making the point that public access was different than open access. And I appreciated your definition of how that played out in your society, but I had never heard that. So thank you for that.
Just one thing to share. There are different, we were talking about business models. Different publishers are looking at different options for open access, and there are some that are looking at whether or not peer review should be part of that process. And so while our two societies do peer review, others may not. And I think that's, again, one of the things that the market is going to flesh out over time as to what is best practice, what's going to be accepted by the author community, what's going to be accepted by the university community, what's going to be accepted by the librarian community. So I don't think we know yet what best practice is going to be.
Daniel, for your fee structure for authors, do you have submission fees, or is it strictly publication fees?
We actually had a very long discussion about that when we were trying to place the fees. I mean, we're strictly publication fees. Our initial problem with submission fees, though, as you saw my statistics, we accept about 55, maybe 60% of our paper, so obviously a submission fee will bring down the cost. But we also do a significant amount of rejection up front without any type of external review. And we feel some responsibility that if someone pays, what exactly are they paying for? And so we were very hesitant to ask people to pay when we might turn around in just a few days and just say it's not suitable for the journal. And then we wouldn't want to get into some sort of reimbursement type cycle or anything like that. So that's why we strictly went with the pay to publish sort of model. Yeah. When you're accepted, you'll pay.
And we have the same. We have had some limited discussions about whether or not OSA should be looking at a submission fee, and for the most part, it's not gone anywhere. So, at least for now.
It's too long a walk. I'm Mitch. Doesn't that mean, though, that your authors who pay publication fees are subsidizing real costs of other people? who are rejected?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anyone who's in publishing knows that there's the features of the cost structure is that there's certain costs that scale as the number of submissions, right? Because you have to handle the papers when they come through the door. And then there's another subset of costs that's associated with the acceptance of papers, or the ones that make it through the peer review process. One thought is, or part of the mentality is that since authors are essentially paying for the stamp of approval of the journal, some publishers would say, therefore, they are sort of paying for the exclusivity or the low acceptance rate, the high rejection rates. And so having a higher priced journal because they have to cover the cost of the papers rejected, in some sense reflects on the supposedly reflects on the quality of the journal, in the sense that, yes, you're paying to be one of that sliver off the top that has the stamp of approval and get published.
I have a couple of questions that I want to throw to the whole panel to address the quality issue. Have you found that there's difficulty in recruiting reviewers for an open access journal versus a subscription journal?
We found that recruiting reviewers, period, is difficult. Whether it be for we haven't found a difference between open access and subscription.
Yeah, in fact, as I said before, since all our journals run out of a central location, our entire referee database is integrated as one system. So all the journals have access to a complete field of referees. It's about 50,000 active referees. And if we found any difference, because of the approach we took with our open access journal being a very high-level, prestige-oriented journal, we actually get a much more positive or quicker response from the referees, and that allows us to have the faster turnaround rates. Because we found that actually the most time in the peer review process is taken up by the referees. The second most time is by the authors. And we've actually reduced our editorial handling on average to about 9 or 10 days per paper that go from receipt to acceptance. It's the authors and referees that take weeks and weeks.
And are any of you leveraging any anti-plagiarism applications such as Doc-a-Lock or Crosscheck for your open access journals?
We looked at iParadigms, the Authenticate program, and we thought about whether or not we would actually do it for all our journals as they came through the door, but we received 37,500 papers every year. And we found that in understanding the reports that come out, you really need to have eyes on them, because where and how the plagiarism takes place, the extent of it, is all manual labor. At least that's what we've found so far. So we only do plagiarism checks by cause. If an editor suspects or receives word from a referee or a reader that causes us to suspect some sort of plagiarism, we'll send it through a system.
So similar to APS, we do not yet use a system. We have been actively looking at Crosscheck and may well incorporate that into our process, although we don't distinguish between open access and subscription-based. For us, it would be part of our editorial process if we were to move in that direction.
Question for Dan. The journals are in the archive. Is there a time frame after publication that they go into the archive? Is there a number of months?
No, actually, we have no embargo period at all. So when we work with the archive, which is now at Cornell, people are able to submit to the archive even before they submit to us. They're able to update immediately. The only thing we ask is that for the archive itself, they not put our version up on the archive. They just the last refereed version that they have, the accepted version. And we also work with closely with Inspire. We feed them our metadata, and then they do a lot of connectivity so that there's connections between the preprint archives and the published material. So we work with them to ensure that that occurs as quickly as possible.
Well, just one quick thing. So for archive, pretty much every publisher in physics, OSA included, allows authors to put their preprints in archives. And it's very actively used. It's, I think, for those of you who are not in physics, probably a big anomaly and a big scare. And it's not turned out to be the scary monster we all thought it might be.
That was partly my question, Elizabeth. I was wondering if you all have done research to find out the impact on letting the content out in other ways. APS, for instance, you've let us take your final published version. Is there been any, have you found that has diverted people from using your site? I mean, this is the kind of research I think we need to be thinking about so that people understand that it's just another dissemination method, or have you done any work in that area?
Well, in a global sense, we haven't seen any overall effect in our subscriptions. We have a very strange distribution of subscriptions in the sense that over 40% of our income comes from what we call Tier 1, Tier 2 schools. So these are non-PhD granting institutions. And so if anything, you would expect that these smaller institutions would be affected by how more broadly things are distributed in an open sense. But we have found, like with the archive, one of our journals, Physical Review D, which is a high-energy physics journal, you can find, and we've done these studies, over 98% of the papers that are published in PhysRev D appear in the archive. And we've seen a decrease in downloads by 2/3 from our website. And yet our subscriptions are still being maintained. So there is an effect, but
not to your financial base.
No, it seems like the community still supports the idea of the journals and how they help them sift through the archive, which receives hundreds and hundreds of thousands of articles.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, I'd like to thank Elizabeth, Daniel, and Diane.